Hey there, good people, and welcome back to the DNP podcast. I'm your host, Debo Agbade, and I'm ready for another week of NFL action. This episode will discuss the state of the Baltimore Ravens after another loss to the Chiefs last Sunday. Also, an NFC contender that you wouldn't have expected before the start of the season. And as I'll do every week, picks for 6 games on the weekend in our Pick 6 section. This pod is available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts, so follow on those platforms and give an honest rating. Like and subscribe if you're watching on YouTube so you can stay up to date with each upload. Now, before we get into the real flow of this episode, I have to obviously get something, put that out to the airwaves, put that out to the people, the good people who watch this podcast. So, as we all do, as NFL fans and NFL aficionados and people who are engaged in the league, we play a little thing called fantasy football. So, this past week, I won my matchup, thankfully, and my opponent just felt he needed to, get something off of his chest.
Debo's team is the greatest.
Thank you, Zach. Appreciate those good words, those kind words, and yes, obviously my team is the greatest, and I do appreciate your, willingness to admit such a thrashing and a beating. So there you are, son. There's your moment in the sun to give the good people of the DNP faithful the information that I duly require that, yes, I draft the best out of anyone who, fantasy footballs. Now on Sunday, the Baltimore Ravens dropped to 1-3 after a 37-20 loss to the Kansas City Chiefs at Arrowhead Stadium. This leaves Lamar 1-6 against the Chiefs in his career and leaves serious doubt for the Baltimore Ravens to reach their Super Bowl expectations from the preseason. And then it came out later on in the week that the hamstring injury that he suffered during the game will lead to him being out for the next 2 to 3 weeks. So the playoff berth for the Baltimore Ravens is in real jeopardy here. Because if you look at the games that Lamar will be missing, that's the Texans this week, which at home, the Texans are a fellow 1-3 team, but the defense is their strength of the team, and if you're going to go to that game with Cooper Rush, it's like, it's a sticky one. Like, you still believe you can win that one, but then there's also a situation easily that comes to us where the defense is just overwhelming, and you lose that one. And then the week after is the Rams, where I just don't see a situation where, even though the game's in Baltimore, that the Ravens without Lamar are going to be able to, come away with that game with the win. So the Ravens, who were my Super Bowl pick, they were my pick to win the Super Bowl before the start of the season. And I do believe that the talent is still there. And just if you're able to hold water until Lamar comes back, then there is still a chance to sort of, come back and run the table and still get into the playoffs. Because, considering the division they're in, consider the Bengals have obviously Joe Burrow out for a much more significant period of time. You've got the Steelers, who I'm still not really convinced by, despite the fact that they're able to get the win in Dublin on Sunday. And the Browns are the Browns, like they just announced that Dylan Gabriel's going to be their starting quarterback now, at least that Flacco's been benched. So you can look at it and still say that, okay, despite the fact that they're 1-3 now and very possibly could be 1-5 going into that bye week, you're still saying, you know what? You could come back and, you can still make something. You can still make something of the season. The season's not completely done, at least. But it's just when you look at the defensive stats, like I've got them here, they're 31st in pass yards allowed per game, 27th in rush yards, 31st in total yards. They're tied first with the most rushing touchdowns allowed with the Titans. So if any stat has you associated with the 2025 Titans, then you're really in a bad state. And then 32nd, so bottom of the league, so even worse than the Titans, in points allowed per game. So I know there's obviously a situation, or excuse you could put up of like, okay, they haven't had Kyle Van Noy, Madubuike has been out for the year and will be out for the remainder of the season. They lost Roquan Smith. They lost Marlon Humphrey in the Chiefs game. But, Roquan Smith and Marlon Humphrey were there when the Bills are running through them and the Lions kind of dominated the line of scrimmage throughout the game. And then the Chiefs, they like after that interception that Lamar threw, like the defense wasn't able to lay a glove on the Kansas City Chiefs, with all due respect. So it's just kind of a situation you look at, and you're looking at the Ravens this season, and it's just like, oof, okay, like there's changes, pardon, there's changes here that needs to be made, or there's something that needs to be a right, kick up of the arse. And maybe a Lamar injury puts more onus on the defense to be like, okay, guys, like let's fix up here. Like we can't rely on the offense to keep us in these games or to just boat race a team, because even they haven't been able to. So we're going into this Texans game, who their weakness is the offense, and you're looking at it and say, okay, let's put a marker down against the Texans and say, no, we're gonna win this game like previous Baltimore Ravens defenses have been able to do, in lieu of an offense that may not be able to hold the same level as them. So it is very much a case of things need to change, things need to be fixed up for the Ravens to be able to kind of get anywhere close to what their preseason expectations were. Because I do recall a couple of years back where the Bills were 4-6, so that's even later in the season, and with a losing record, you're worrying, and the Dolphins were high up. That was, believe the first or second year with Matt McDaniel and Tua, and they were flying. And the Bills were able to run the table, 11-6, host the Chiefs in the playoff game. Obviously, they lost that, but you're still saying that, okay, the Bills, a similar team, a team in our sort of tier, you would say, in the AFC, has the capability to be in a precarious position during the season and still run the table and win the division and make their way through. I guess one caveat to that would be the fact that Josh Allen himself is able to perform in the big moments and really step up. Where if you look at Lamar, you look at Sunday, that game was 7-3 with the Ravens in the lead, and he's the one on first down throws a prayer which ends up getting an interception and turns the momentum in the game. And it's like, on the road, away from home, you don't need to hand opportunities, especially to the Chiefs, who themselves, it's Patriots-like, where they're not going to give you that inch, and if you give them the inch, they're taking a mile. And in the game on Sunday, they very much took that mile, and it was their handled business against the Ravens. So it's tough sledding. Obviously, I mean, as someone who chose this team as my Super Bowl pick, it is, a bit worrying, a bit like, okay, maybe if you gave me another opportunity, I'd give more of a think to it. I still believe the talent, especially on the offensive side of the ball, like Derrick Henry, Lamar Jackson, and Zay Flowers. And if you give this team a stretch, they should be able to get the business handled and get stuff done and get themselves into the playoffs, which, with those Texans-Rams games without Lamar, let's say they're 1-5 going into the bye, they've got home to the Bears, at Dolphins, at Vikings, at Browns. That could easily be 4-0, get to 5-5, and Jets, Bengals, Steelers, all three at home consecutively, at Bengals versus Patriots, at Lambeau Field against the Packers, which who knows what they'll be fighting for at that stage of the season, and at Steelers. So the way I see it, I think as long as you can get to that Week 18 Steelers game and have that be a decider for the division, or at least win and in with regards to a wild card spot, you've done well there, and you've given yourself a real chance to be able to be that wild card team that nobody wants to face, and be that team that, oh no, we're going up against Lamar, which, whatever you think about his big game antics, which I guess obviously I mentioned earlier, like, it is still Lamar Jackson. He should be able to handle business. And if you're not one of those teams that, let's say, it has the Mahomes and the Burrow, like if you're the Chargers and you're, won your division, maybe like looks very possible, and you're feeling good about yourselves, but then you're welcoming a 7th seed or a 6th seed Lamar Jackson into the fray, like, oh snap, okay, like this is a bad draw. Like, you would have wanted something easy, something more palatable, or something that doesn't have the high ceiling of competition that the Baltimore Ravens do have, and I still believe have the capability to go on that Super Bowl run because of who they have on that roster and how high they should and have performed in the past. So it is interesting to kind of look at what situation the Ravens are in. Like, do I believe that they're going to just wither and falter? I just can't see it. I just don't believe that this is going to be a team that misses the playoffs or has any form of just complete capitulation, which at this moment in time at 1-3 is a very precarious position, a very unfavorable position. But considering that they're in the AFC North and that the Steelers aren't much to really consider about, write home about, the Bengals have their own issues, the Browns, I just can't see. The Browns are the one win, right? So that's obviously a team you can consider the Ravens better than, and consider the Ravens much superior to, considering the scoreline as well in that game. I think in terms of the Ravens, at least the way I see it, as long as they can get to that Steelers game, make it a winning-in spot, because Bears, Dolphins, Vikings, the most inconsistent team so far this season. Like, week 1, able to get that comeback win against the Bears, then complete falter against the Falcons, then dominance against the Bengals, and then what happened in Dublin, which they it's just a whole roller coaster, up and down, and that's with multiple quarterbacks and Brian Flores' defense, which you would have thought would be much better. So your Ravens get a win there. Browns again, Dylan Gabriel. Who knows if Dylan Gabriel's even the quarterback then? Maybe it's Shador, maybe it's Flacco. The Jets, if you saw them on Monday night, same old mistake-prone individuals. Obviously, Breece Hall had a lot to say about that. Bengals, by that position, it's probably Browning, or even if the Bengals have made a move at quarterback. But there is potential here for the Ravens to make that run that would get them into the playoffs and be the hot team going into the playoffs, which those Bills were, that I mentioned a couple of years back after starting 4-6. So the way I see it, I do believe that the Baltimore Ravens will still be fine. Like, I know there's a lot of conversation about who they are in terms of the defense being really poor, and that is true. Like, I'm not exactly going here to fault that, but they did start really poorly last season, but were able to just, with more games, with more reps with each other, just get sorted. So I do believe that, looking at this schedule and just with who the team are in general, like the teams who are the creme de la creme and the top of the top, with the top of the top quarterback play, which Lamar is known to bring, I just think that the Ravens, when it's all said and done, when we get to week 18, when we get to the playoffs starting, that they will be there and will be playing meaningful football in January. Okay, now let's move on to a team that's probably moved off your radar considering they played on Thursday night last week, but the Seattle Seahawks are a team that's turned into a real NFC contender after the first 4 weeks of the season. And if you're looking at how this roster was constructed, it all kind of starts with, at least for this year, the cojones call that was made when they moved off of Geno Smith in favour of Sam Darnold, because you look at what the Seahawks ownership, and John Schneider in particular as their GM, decided to do in terms of moving off of Pete Carroll 2 years ago, moving off of Geno Smith this past offseason, and DK Metcalf. At the time, those were seen as quite head-scratching, quite shocking moves, at least in the Pete Carroll sense, because I believe they were a winning team, 9-8 or 10-7 in that season. Pete Carroll left, and you're like, hold on a minute, you just kind of missed the playoffs, kind of sneaky, still competitive. Why would you then, move off of Pete Carroll and go into, changing someone who had been there for many years? Similar thing with Geno Smith in terms of he was solid. They had won 10 games last season and just missed the playoffs due to like a very minuscule tiebreaker. And you're like, hold on a minute, you're not too far. You just, keep plugging away, keep moving forward with Geno, and things are going to be okay. And then DK Metcalf, I think more of a contractual thing. Obviously, he went to went to Pittsburgh and got himself a really big deal. So in that sense, it's like maybe head scratching in the sense of, okay, you're kind of punting or you're not trying to be competitive going in for a rebuild because you also move off for Tyler Lockett as well. So these are quite ambitious moves made by one franchise, which, prior to the start of the season, you're thinking, okay, like, what really are they? What really are they going to do? And even me personally, when doing my predictions, I had the Seahawks finishing third in the NFC West. And I guess, obviously, with regards to the Niners as a team I had ahead of them, their injury worries have maybe changed the outlook of their season. But, even remembering my reasoning for having them in third, it was like, because it's a tough division and didn't really like this defense to be good. JSN's going like I knew you know these things, right? That JSN had a full-on breakout last year, performed really well even when DK was there, and now he's second in receiving yards and is showing himself to be a real true wide receiver one in this league. Like that Ohio State pipeline in terms of receivers just proves right again. And then in terms of who they're able to replace Pete Carroll with, obviously Mike McDonald, and you're seeing, as I said in the last sections, what the Ravens defense has been since Mike McDonald has left, and what the Seahawks defense is now, is in terms of like, okay, that this is a real defensive, guru, to say the least. And it's in a division when you've got the Rams and the Niners and even the Cardinals, who they played last week, and you're saying they've got Trey McBride, they've got Marvin Harrison Jr., and you're able to do a really good job and stifle them. And even looking at what the defense has been able to do this season, they're third in points allowed per game, so they're keeping teams low in the scoring pile. The yards are kind of middling or even bottom tiering, but in terms of the points allowed, they're third. In terms of sacks, they're sixth. In terms of interceptions, they're tied for second. So when you're looking at the big splash plays or the plays that defense really puts offense behind the eight ball in, the Seahawks are ranking very highly with regards to teams in the league. And you're saying, okay, that's a competitive outfit. That's a team that you're going into seeing them on the schedule for the upcoming week and saying, okay, right, we've got to strap our shoes up and get ready for a battle, because it's a team that really will be competitive in every game they play and will, more often than not come out on top, especially with a defense like that. And respect where it's due in terms of moving on from Geno Smith and going into Sam Darnold. Geno Smith, he's obviously got himself a big deal in Las Vegas, but he's leading the league in interceptions. He's got 7 interceptions in 4 games. Even as someone personally who has Gentine Bowers in my fantasy team, Geno throwing those picks, I saw that and was very, very disappointed and very annoyed. And I can only imagine that a Raiders fan looking at it and saying, we're giving this guy 40-odd a year, while Darnold's in Seattle getting himself like the 33 range, 35 range, not that much guaranteed. And you're saying, okay, they probably saw something that we didn't, or at least Darnold is able to do what Geno did in Seattle, if at least, and if not to a higher level, considering what he was able to do with Minnesota last year. And even when you're looking at Minnesota themselves and their quarterback situation, like JJ McCarthy looks quite inconsistent to say the least in those first 2 games, and then Carson Wentz as well, and what he's done in those first 2 games. Again, it's just like the inconsistencies of it all, that at least with Sam Darnold, if the Vikings have kept him, you're having a quite clear sort of consistency and clear, okay, that was last season, this is now, and we can just kick on from a team that won 14 games last season. So when I look at Seattle and I look at even the landscape in the NFC, I'm saying that, okay, I'd probably still have them second behind the Rams. I think they move up from the Niners simply because of the injury issues and also because the Seahawks are admittedly much better than I expected. And in the landscape of the NFC, I would say they're a team that definitely sees themselves in the playoffs. Like, if you're going through the NFC, I would say in the North, the Packers and the Lions are going to be in the playoffs. That's quite easy to see. the Eagles are going to be in the playoffs. The Bucks are going to win that division because the inconsistencies of the rest of the teams, like it's only really Atlanta that has any form of playoff real look or playoff aspirations. The other teams are probably just going to hope to be competitive because, looking at what the Panthers were able to move on from after that Falcons win, which was handed to them, but the responding with a absolute beating put on them by the Patriots. You're just saying that the Panthers aren't really anything. The Saints, they're still winless, and it's just tough to believe that they'll be able to be any sort of playoff threat. But moving on from that, again, Packers, Lions, Eagles, Bucks, Rams, Seahawks. Those are 6 teams right there that I can, given the quarter point of the season, and unless, obviously, barring injuries, barring anything catastrophic, I'd say those 6 teams I can confidently say are going to be in the playoffs. And then you've got all the other teams in the NFC fighting for that last remaining spot, because all the teams I mentioned have the consistencies, have the quarterbacks, have the balanced rosters, and that obviously the other teams in the league haven't been able to show so far, that I can say that, okay, looking at what these teams, especially Seattle, which is kind of the focus of this section and focus of this part of the podcast, is that, okay, they're a team that I didn't think was going to be in this round prior to the season, and considering how they've looked so far, and even players on defense, Devon Witherspoon, Julian Love, it's just a very settled, very so far consistent team that could easily be 4-0 if you're looking at what the Niners were able to do in that last bit of play in the Week 1 game. Yeah, I mean, Seahawks face the Bucks this weekend. That's going to be a really fun matchup. The Seahawks are going to be doing that off of a mini bye, 10 days rest going into that one. The Bucks will be looking to bounce back from their loss to the Eagles. But I think, just to finish off, Packers, Lions, Eagles, Bucks, Rams, Seahawks. I think in the NFC there are 6 spots that have already been tied up, and those are the teams that are going to fill them up. So for the rest of the NFC, you've got 1 spot to fight for. Right, it's time for everyone's favourite part of the week. It's the Pick 6. We end every episode picking 6 games over the weekend against a spread. And we'll just move on and talk about what happened last week. It was a 3-3 week. It was 500. It's been a tough season so far. 9-14 in total in terms of the record. You obviously don't want to be in the red. Don't want to be in the losing column. But it's a long season. Just in week 4 now. So definitely think, with more information, more more know-how, more stats, more of an idea, basically, of how teams are going to perform or how teams are going to look across the year. It should get more on the brain and make the right picks. So I'm not too wavered. I'm not feeling too bad because we're gonna turn this something around. So in terms of the picks last week, first of all, Jaguars plus 3.5 against the Niners. That one came in. That defense was really solid. Got 4 takeaways. One that turnover battle force has near 0. Despite the fact that Brock Purdy came back, even though he's less than 100%, even on Sunday, looks like he's going to miss a Thursday night game against the Rams. So, very troubling times for the 49ers, you could say, in terms of how their season outlook is going to look when you can't have a stable quarterback position. Second one, Lions minus 8.5 against the Browns. Again, Lions don't play with their food. They're a team that when they get up, they stay up. They keep going for more points, go for the jugular. And a Browns team that 10 points couldn't really keep up on offense, and have now made a change at quarterback in the starting position for the London game this weekend against the Vikings. So that was a nice old win in the column for me. I'm going to take this win, the Bears plus 1.5 at the Raiders, because officially the Bears were underdogs at the time of recording. So that was just that's good. 25-24 they're able to win that, block the field goal at the end. So that's good for Chicago there. They'll love that going into the bye at 2-2. Then the losses: Titans plus 7.5 at Texans. Boy, shutout. Second divisional shutout in the week, in a row. In terms of, obviously you had the Falcons Panthers the week before, and then this past week you had Titans Texans. But yeah, the Titans are a bit of a mess right now, and it's a team that I shouldn't really be tailing or backing when it comes to these things. And again, as I said before, more season that we have, the more you know. And I think I've known that in their current situation, the Titans aren't a team that you should root for or be putting your bets behind. The next one, Vikings minus 2.5 at Steelers. Again, as I said, generally been the most inconsistent team so far this season. You look at how they looked the first 2 quarters against Chicago, then fourth quarter, come back and win. Second game, Falcons, complete disaster class on both sides of the ball, especially the offensive side of the ball, because they weren't able to get anything going. And then JJ's out, Carson's in, absolutely dominate the Bengals, which, considering how the game against Steelers went, maybe the Bengals need to worry a little bit more, because if the Vikings are able to just minute 1 to minute 60 just absolutely wipe you out, dominate the game from start to finish, and then Dublin Steelers were able to muscle up and get up to a huge lead and let things slip later on, but still maintain themselves in the fray. So the Vikings just need to settle down and build a consistent level instead of just the roller coaster of up, down. So very disappointed with how that bet went. And then the Packers at Cowboys on Sunday night. Packers minus 6.5, and they play out a 40-40 tie. Just absolutely insane situation there, and insane sort of, obviously a lot of discourse this past week in terms of whenever a tie happens, bad for the sport, whether just don't need ties. And I mean, the way football is kind of played with the playoffs, and ties kind of have this sort of it's not really well defined sort of metric in regards to how the records play out, because at least as a British person, big fan of international football, or soccer as Americans would say, and at least because it's a point accumulation game in the leagues, a draw means 1 point, and if you're a team who's a little lesser known facing a favourite, getting that point is a huge deal, and ties make sense. And in the NFL, the way ties work with you play overtime and then a tie is still possible, it's like, okay, why waste our time with overtime then if you're still giving us this extra period and then there's a tie? It's like, okay, either don't half-ass it and say, okay, we're going to give you extra time to win the game, but we're also going to make a tie possible or draw, and it's just quite an interesting way things go. But with regards to the pick six, the Packers very much did not cover the spread, and if anything, I guess the Cowboys covered the one bet, but it was just disappointing way for the week to go. They're 3-3, 9-14 on the year, but actually, considering the fact that there are buyers, there's not as many, home runs as I would have liked. So obviously, doing the pick six, I do, oblige myself to pick 6 games each week to, cover the spread and make sure that I, hold myself to that standard. But the standard has to get better, and I'm doing my best, and I'm gonna make sure that we end this season on top and end the season with a winning record. So this week, number 1, Eagles minus 2.5 versus the Broncos. Broncos are not going to face the Bengals every week. It's not going to be that easy. You're not going to have a picture that's going around where you've got 3 offensive linemen and one defensive lineman for the Broncos, and then the tackles are getting beat on the outside and up sack Jake Brown is done. The Eagles are a much more complete team in terms of personnel, whether they use that personnel to their full standing, considering AJ Brown clearly doesn't believe so, seeing his tweet this past week. But I just don't. Especially at home in Philadelphia, the Broncos defense, which has its inconsistencies throughout the year in terms of how Bo Nix has been playing. Obviously, he played really well against the Bengals on Monday night, but I feel like the way the Bengals are now, you kind of not chalk it off and say, that was like a nothing performance. Like, it does mean something. They're able to beat a bad team. That's what good teams, or at least teams, should do when you're facing a bad team. But the Eagles are the creme de la creme at the minute, are Super Bowl champions. They're 4-0, haven't lost yet, 20 wins in the last 21 games. And with regards to winning by a field goal, I could say at home the Eagles are able to maintain that sort of home field advantage and come away with the good win there and cover the spread, which is what I kind of need the most. So yeah, the Eagles -2.5, get that run game going. The defense still stifling as it's always been. Just need that complete game, but I think even without the complete game, they're able to cover the spread against the Rams no matter how that game went. The Bucks as well, they're able to go away despite the second half being a little techie, but Broncos, Eagles -2.5. Lock that one in. Number 2, Dolphins -1.5 at Carolina. I think last week showed that Carolina aren't what they were thinking they might have been after, obviously an impressive scoreline. Wouldn't say it's an impressive performance, and then they responded with a complete S-show against the Patriots. And I think, considering what the Dolphins have been able to show in the past couple of weeks, like even keeping it relatively close against the Bills on Thursday night and handling business against the Jets, when they face a bad team, they can beat a bad team. And this -1.5 spread is quite light. I think the Dolphins could easily win by quite a considerable scoreline, as long as they don't completely, doo-doo themselves. I'm not trying to, say any bad words on this show, but yeah, I think the Dolphins are able to, come away with the win there. And despite the Tyreek Hill injury, which obviously hope that he's all good and he's at least happy and healthy and, can get back to somewhere close to what he's been able to show in his career. But just even without that, I think Waddle, Achane in the backfields, their Dolphins offense will be able to operate and come away with the win in Carolina. Number 3, Buccaneers +3.5 at Seahawks. Let me just have that final check just to make sure that, yep, they are in fact underdogs in Seattle, which I do obviously believe the Seahawks are a good team. I did just, wax lyrical about that for a good 10 minutes in the last section, but I feel like a field goal is a bit too much for a team of Tampa Bay's offensive prowess, at least, and their defense has been able to really show out as well. Like the corners that they've had in Zara McCollum and Benjamin Morrison, like I feel like the whole defense in general is able to, keep the non-JSN players at bay and keep, the backfield of Kenneth Walker and Charbonnet relatively quiet, or relatively to the point where it's not going to be a touchdown game. I think the way Baker's been playing, even when you see that first half against the Eagles, that he is someone who is at that top 10 region of quarterbacks in the league. And when you've got someone playing like that, they should rarely be field goal underdogs in a game despite being on the road. So I'll take those Buccaneers all day to the shot. Considering the aforementioned Titans, I've gone with Cardinals -7.5 at home to the Titans, actually. So they're off the 10-day rest, playing on Thursday Night Football, going into a game against one of, if not the worst team in the league. I just consider that the Cardinals should be easily handling business there. 7.5 over a touchdown. Give me that. 5th, Monday Night Football, Jaguars +3.5 versus the Chiefs. considering how last week went in terms of that defense being stifling, in terms of that defense being able to force the issue, which when you're looking at a team like the Chiefs, you do need to make things uncomfortable. And so far, the Jaguars have proven to make things uncomfortable for teams and make them uncomfortable for offenses. So to think that the Chiefs, who could easily still come away with the win, but the fact that it's 3.5, a field goal game wins it, I don't think that the Chiefs going up against the currently situated Ravens defense and being able to essentially blitz them can carry over to the same level. Obviously, it's Andy Reid, Mahomes, they're still going to operate, but I don't see it being more than the field goal that the spread suggests. So I'll take the Jaguars in that one, especially on a big stage of Monday Night Football. And number 6, which is 6 for a reason, it's kind of the one I'm not sure of, but at least one that I feel comfortable enough going with. Saints -1.5, home to the Giants. I feel like it's quite a high potential calm down spot for the Giants, considering being able to beat the Chargers. Obviously a great win for them. Dart's debut, Scatterbo running the ball and getting into the end zone. It just feels like it's all sunshine and rainbows, and it feels like the Saints at home, who themselves are chasing that first win of the season, could easily put things together for away. You have Olave, you have Alvin Kamara, you have at least the best offensive players in the game, especially now that Malik Nabers is out for the year. I think the Saints -1.5 being able to just get the win there is something that something that I'll take as part of the pick 6. So those are my 6 picks for the week. Do you think any different? Do you think anything else you would have gone with? Let me know down in the comments. And that's the podcast for today. That's the podcast for this week. Thanks for listening. Hope you all have a good one. And let's hope we have a good weekend of football. Bye bye.